Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1211. Monster. With Divine Tune, he can release unique soundwave attacks, attacking all the enemies around him at the same time. Furthermore, he could inflict great damage without putting in great efforts to perform. With a wave of his hand or the pluck of a finger, he could release a soundwave attack that could hardly be defended against. If the misty Illusory Manor had not used their full force to encircle him back then, they might have ended up with a completely different result. The fearsomeness of the 9 Nether 14th Young Master far surpassed any other 9 Nether Young Masters apart from the 9 Nether 1st Young Master. That was a fight that involved over 10 Saint Venerables and nearly 100 Saint Emperors, along with over 200 first-rate experts of the 3 Holy Lands. But such a grand lineup was still suppressed and slain until chaos reigned everywhere on the battlefield. Finally, it was 2 Saint Monarchs from the misty Illusory Manor who succeeded in an ambush, stealing Divine Tune from his hands, allowing them to turn the battle in their favor. The 9 Nether 14th Young Master who had Divine Tune in his hands was truly unrivaled under the heavens. The addition of Divine Tune provided an effect that was much stronger than just 1+1. With the 9 Nether 14th Young Master's unique 9 Nether's essence chi infused into the one and only Divine Tune, the effect it produced was straight up terrifying. He was undoubtedly the strongest expert under the heavens. There was no one of in this scenario. With Miao Qing Cheng unable to come out, the 9 Nether 14th Young Master with his Divine Tune was simply the strongest. Without Divine Tune, the 9 Nether 14th Young Master was only one of the strongest experts in the world. Back then, even after having lost Divine Tune, the 9 Nether 14th Young Master still managed to barge his way out of the encirclement, inflicting huge damages to his opponents while doing so. Only after exceedingly heavy sacrifices did they manage to force the heavily injured 9 Nether 14th Young Master into Tien Fa Forest, sealing him there with the help of a previously set-up formation. After that matter, they still had to arrange the 8 great Saint Venerables of Tien Fa to watch the entrance day and night. Because of this mission, the 8 Saint Venerables were also nearly turned into cripples. One had to know that at that time, the 8 great Saint Venerables of Tien Fa all had cultivations at the peak of the 4th level of Saint Emperor. They were only one step away from the Saint Venerable realm. But because of them guarding the seal of the 9 Nether 14th Young Master, they'd nearly become crippled instead. The most terrifying thing was that was a heavily injured 9 Nether 14th Young Master. If he was so terrifying even with that much suppression on him, then how strong was he when he recovered to his peak strength? The few hundred years of exhaustion did not affect only the 8 great Saint Venerables. The 9 Nether 14th Young Master's strength had also been nearly expended. Most importantly, because of him exerting himself and the effects of the seal, his recovery speed was also exceedingly slow. In the moment that he escaped, all his old injuries had still not recovered. Furthermore, he'd expended 90% of his strength breaking through the seal. But even so, with just 10% of his strength, he managed to kill half of the 20 Saint Emperors who ambushed him, and then make his escape. And that was still the 9 Nether 14th Young Master without Divine Tune. Now, the 9 Nether 14th Young Master that was equipped with Divine Tune was also very likely completely healed. And facing a fully recovered 9 Nether 14th Young Master who also had Divine Tune with him, the other opponent actually managed to fight with him all the way here. Who was the other person to actually have such a level of strength? Judging from the sounds of that commotion, the two of them seemed to have fought for a very long time. A long and sinister cry rang out, and although the source of that cry was several hundred li away, it still caused everyone to shudder involuntarily. Just what kind of monster are you? The 14th young master roared with rage. That voice contained an indescribable confusion and an unspeakable frustration. It sounded as if an extremely strange matter had happened, that he could not understand. The voice that came from the distance caused everyone to feel exceedingly curious in their hearts. Just who was the other person that could cause even an unrivaled expert like the 14th young master to ask in such a confused manner? As the crowd was still wondering with disbelief, another howl rang out, the sound clearly having moved much closer to the campsite. What shocking movement speed! To actually cover over 30 li in just a few short breaths. At this time, the 14th young master seemed to have discovered something, and he roared aloud. Is there anyone in front? A bunch of useless things. Quickly get out of the way for me. Don't let that thing that I'm chasing get into contact with anyone. Otherwise, the results will be unimaginable. His voice was filled with urgency and extremely rage. Everyone froze instantly. Why would the 14th young master say those things? He didn't know that there were people here or the cultivation of the people here. Why would he shout so urgently? Why? Only Jun Moxie furrowed his brows as he cried out. Everyone, take note. The moment you see anyone appear from the northeast side, no matter who it is, dodge with all your might. No one is allowed to come in contact with it. You are not to engage the person either. You just need to avoid it at all costs. No one is to disobey this order. Jun Moxie instantly gave the order without any hesitation. The Beast Kings did not hesitate either, directly passing the order to their army. Mo Wudao furrowed his brows. Manor Lord Jun. With just that shout from the 14th young master, you immediately gave such an order. Isn't that too flippant? What if the strange races attack at this time? How will we fight if our formations are broken? Jun Moxie smiled and snorted. Did you manage to hear the urgency and fear in the 14th young master's voice? Could it be that you cannot understand the meaning in that? Mo Wudao was unable to reply. Even the 14th young master needed to holler so urgently, even going as far as to issue a warning. Do you think that the 14th young master is someone who would shout like that for no reason? Jun Moxie said coldly. Large beads of sweat instantly appeared on Mo Wudao's face as he finally understood the severity of the situation. The 14th young master was someone that wouldn't utter a squeak even when hacked by 100 blades. For him to shout so urgently right now, what did it mean? The answer was obvious. For the 14th young master to shout those words, the answer is very obvious. The human body is definitely very important to that thing that he is chasing. Then, Palace Lord Mo, I would like to ask you, which part of a human's body would provide the greatest help for such a thing? Jun Moxie snorted and continued. Since that part of the human body is beneficial for that thing, I trust that it would not be a good thing for the human in question. You can't even understand this much, and you dared to doubt me? For creating trouble at such an important juncture, what is your motive? Something that even the 14th young master is wary of. Who in this crowd dares to say that they can deal with it? Or does Palace Lord Mo have the confidence to deal with it? Jun Moxie sighed. It's not a bad thing to be concerned about the big picture at all times, but you need to ask yourself if you're making mistakes with good intentions. Why must you be so persistent? Could it be that you're a person that cannot be praised? I just said that Palace Lord deserved your position, but now, it seems like I was wrong. Mo Wudao's ears turned red completely, and he didn't know how to reply. At this time, The loud sounds had already grown even closer. This howling sound seemed to be filled with intense excitement. The 9 nether 14th young master's musical notes turned more fervent, and he seemed to completely disregard even the melody. Far off, a heavy sound rang out, as if it was trying to stop something. Jun Moxie and Gu Han exchanged a glance, and both of them rushed out together. Mei Shuayan looked at him once, and immediately took over his commanding position. With a wave of her hand, everyone began to move out of the way to dodge the incoming calamity. Jun Moxie and Gu Han were both at the Saint Monarch level, and their movement speeds were incredibly fast. In merely an instant, they'd moved 20, 30 li away, finally managing to see the intense battle. But the sight before their eyes caused both of them to suck in a cold breath involuntarily. Before they saw this, although both of them knew that the situation was serious, they couldn't form an accurate expectation in their minds. But now that they saw the situation themselves, they still didn't know what they were looking at, because all of it looked too bizarre. The scene was completely chaotic, and a long twisting trail that stretched for several hundred li like a violent dragon could be seen on the ground. Without a doubt, that was the path that the 9 nether 14th young master and the monster that he was chasing had passed through. Looking down from the sky, it was actually a newly created long cavern, stretching several hundred li long, and tens of zhang wide. There weren't even a single piece of stone remaining that was bigger than a human skull. It was as stark as if the Yellow River had suddenly appeared in the middle of the ocean. The 9 nether 14th young master was brandishing divine tune energetically with his hands and feet, sending out thousands of ear-piercing sound waves in all directions. His figure was like a black tornado in the air, spinning rapidly, disappearing and appearing again in all positions. Before him, there was a humanoid thing. This thing had a complete human form, with arms, legs, and a head. However, it completely lacked any eyes, ears, mouth, nose, and other features. This face was completely a blank slate. A monster with a head, but no face. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1212. Cannot be killed. A greenish light shone around the monster's body, and although it didn't have any eyes or ears, it still managed to dodge the soundwave attacks accurately. Not only was it able to defend, it could even counterattack fiercely. It actually fought closely against the 9 nether 14th young master, attacking and defending. At the very least, it wasn't being beaten up in a one-sided manner. The situation now was no longer about the 9 nether 14th young master chasing after that thing. Right now, he was only trying to stop it with all his might. He was using all his abilities to stop the monster from approaching the army at the front. As for the monster, its intentions were very obvious. It was charging over with all its might, wanting to come into contact with the crowd. Jun Moxie focused his gaze, and although he couldn't clearly see the 9 nether 14th young master's expression, he managed to see that his clothes had already turned wet. It was clearly drenched from his sweat. Jun Moxie's eyes shrunk, and he exchanged a glance with Gu Han. Both of their hearts were in shock. Although this monster was at a disadvantage and did not seem to be a match for the 9 nether 14th young master, defending more than attacking, but it was able to tire 9 nether 14th young master to such an extent. From this, it was obvious that this monster's strength was not low. The 9 nether 14th young master's movements turned faster, and with a bang sound, he ruthlessly slammed a palm down onto the monster's body. A violent boom rang out, and the monster stumbled several steps backwards. The 9 nether 14th young master roared loudly, charging forward. In that moment, countless loud bangs rang out continuously like firecrackers. In the blink of an eye, the 9 nether 14th young master's palms disappeared into a flurry of afterimages, and the booming sound stretched into a long note that even the best singers would not be able to sing. Jun Moxie widened his eyes with amazement. In that short instant, the 9 nether 14th young master had smashed out over 1,000 palms. And every palm carried his full strength. Every single palm landed perfectly, smashing into the monster's body. The monster was continuously beaten backwards, and the 9 nether 14th young master did not relent, following through with his attacks. Just this round of attacks had caused them to go back a full 40 li of distance. With a loud hong sound, the monster's green body suddenly burst in the air, thoroughly turning into countless fragments, filling the air with an eerie green light. It looked as if countless fireflies were dancing through the air. It's over. It ended just like that. Jun Moxie and Gu Han's brows remained tightly knitted, looking at the greenish lights in the air. Their gazes were filled with uncertainty and strong suspicion. The 9 nether 14th young master landed on the ground with a loud bang, smashing a small pit under him. With the 9 nether 14th young master's abilities, it wouldn't be an issue for him to walk on snow without leaving a single footprint, and step on water without forming any ripples. Even if he walked on cotton, he wouldn't sink at all. But now, he'd actually smashed a large pit on the ground with his landing. It was obvious to see how much energy had been sapped from him in this battle, to the point where he could no longer control his strength. After that, he straightened his body, breathed out heavily and stared intently at the green lights. His eyes were actually filled with fear and caution, as well as some disbelief. What is going on? Jun Moxie asked. The 9 nether 14th young master did not even turn around, continuing to fix his eyes on the green substance. Be careful. It's not over yet. Jun Moxie widened his eyes. It's not over. Looking at the greenish substance again, he grew confused. It's not dead even in this state. In the air, the greenish mist began to sink, instead of rising. What the hell is that thing? And how did you start fighting with it? Jun Moxie remained on full alert as he stood beside the 9 nether 14th young master. 9 nether 14th young master did not even spare a glance at Jun Moxie as he continued staring intently at the green light. Who knows what this thing is? I was on my way here to watch this war for seizing the heavens, since the collapse of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains is a big thing, and there will most likely not be any more war for seizing the heavens in the future. I also wanted to take a look at those so-called strange races and see what they look like. But when I was crossing a mountain, I suddenly came upon an extremely dangerous aura. A strange glint flickered in his eyes as he continued. It's been too long since anyone was able to make me feel any danger, so my curiosity was raised. When I went over, I saw a monster sucking something from a group of wild beasts' corpses. Sucking something from the corpses of wild beasts. Jun Moxie furrowed his brows tightly. Could this fellow be a vampire? But he didn't look like one. Ah. Vampires also had proper physical bodies. And once their bodies are broken apart, they're done. Besides, those mountains that the 9 nether 14th young master passed by on his way here were all volcanoes that had already erupted. Even if there were corpses of wild beasts there that hadn't been completely burned away, they should be thoroughly dried up by now. Then, what was the monster sucking on? What could it suck? This daddy saw how filthy that thing was and decided to kill it. But who would have thought that this fellow actually cannot be killed? The 14th young master sounded extremely frustrated. Throughout the journey here, I'd already shattered that fellow's body at least 7, 8 times. But each time it exploded, it would just turn into this state. After the amount of time it takes for a stick of incense to burn through, it would congeal together again and turn into that ghastly appearance. This had already gone on for 2 days and 2 nights. The 14th young master sighed speechlessly. In these 2 days, I hadn't even managed to get a sip of water, only focusing on attacking it. After 2 days and 2 nights, it was still completely fine, remaining as spirited as before. At this rate, it might remain as strong as before, but I will definitely be exhausted to death by it. Jun Moxie's eyes nearly dropped out of his head. There's actually such a ridiculous thing in this world? Feck. This isn't some weird novel on a computer, right? The ability to resurrect without limit after being killed. Ridiculous? There's something even more ridiculous. Just this afternoon, we came upon a group of god-danged wolves. The 14th young master cursed angrily. There were only about 40 or 50 of them, and they were existences that were too insignificant for me to notice. But that monster simply made a pass through that pack of wolves, and all of those idiot wolves died immediately. Later, I realized that that monster had suddenly grown stronger by a significant amount. It definitely had something to do with that pack of wolves. That is why I told all of you to quickly get out of the way. Jun Moxie was completely speechless. What kind of thing was this? To have such an overpowered ability? No wonder the 14th young master had called out so urgently just now. As he thought till here, Jun Moxie felt a shiver travel down his spine. If this fellow was allowed to run through the army camp, how many people would die? And what kind of levels would this monster's strength reach? Jun Moxie did not dare to imagine further. It would be a disaster that could annihilate all of them. If such a disaster truly appeared, there was no need for the strange races to do anything. This monster alone would be able to finish off the entire army. Gu Han's face also turned exceedingly unsightly. Jun Moxie could understand Gu Han's feelings perfectly. The grand battle was about to begin, and such an incomprehensible creature had suddenly appeared. It was no wonder that his mood was not good. Fortunately, because of the 14th young master's sudden appearance, the threat of this disaster had dropped greatly. Perhaps the luck of the Xian continent wasn't completely used up yet. In the short time that everyone was talking, the green mist began to spin, turning faster and faster, until finally, with a whooshing sound, a figure formed in midair. And from that illusory figure, there was the faint shape of a human forming. Feck. It's like this every time. 14th young master cursed with rage. Just how do I kill this monster? Can't you attack it after it explodes into pieces? Since it can't fight back, why don't you try to destroy it utterly? Jun Moxie asked. It is indeed unable to retaliate after being smashed apart, but the greenish mist is just like air, and nothing can hurt it. The 14th young master whipped his head around angrily and stared at Jun Moxie. If I could destroy it after smashing it apart, this daddy would have already thrown a quarter of its body in the east, 1/4 to the Pacific Ocean, 1/4 to Blizzard's Silver City, and another quarter to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. I'm not an idiot. What are you looking at me with that kind of gaze for? Jun Moxie patted his forehead speechlessly, and just when he was about to speak again, the 14th young master stopped him. It's useless. I've already tried every method. Extreme cold and extreme heat, Nothing has an effect on this thing. Feck. What kind of monster is this? It's actually so domineering. Jun Moxie cursed. I would like to know that too. The 14th young master rolled his eyes speechlessly. Just at this time, a shrill sound rang out as the green mist disappeared, and a monster about the same height as a human appeared. Turning its faceless head around a few times, it suddenly rushed off, wanting to dash past the three. Its target was obviously the location of the Joint Army base. So, this time, the one who reacted the fastest was actually Guhan. With a flash, he blocked before the path of the monster and sent out a stream of heavy blows. With a few soft banging sounds, the monster stumbled backwards a few steps unstably. Then, it seemed to slowly grow more agile, dancing through the air. In the next moment, it had actually reached a level where it could fight and defend against Guhan equally. In addition to its body that cannot be killed or destroyed, and its capabilities of absorbing life, the danger of this thing was even above the strange races. Jun Moxie looked intently, finding the matter stranger and stranger the more he observed. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1213. Everyone feels depressed. It wasn't clear what one should call this creature. If one said that it was a human, there were no humans that were like this. But if one said that it's not a human, it was completely similar to a human expert, apart from not having a face. I'll take over from here. Hurry up and take a rest. Jun Moxie took out a large jug of water from the Hongjun pagoda, a pot of wine, and several large pieces of hot meat as well as tens of steaming hot buns. Eat quickly. We might still need you to take over later. The 14th young master's eyes lit up. Who would have thought that you'd be carrying so much good stuff with you? What kind of technique is this? It's a unique high-level technique. You should at least look and see who this young master is. Jun Moxie snorted proudly. But when he didn't get a reply from the 14th young master, he turned around and saw that that fellow had raised the pot of wine and started chugging happily. A loud gurgling sound rang out, and the water jug also emptied with a speed visible to the naked eye. Following that, without washing his hands, he picked up a large piece of meat and took a large bite. Jun Moxie's widened with disbelief. This one bite had taken at least half a gene of meat. And that fellow only chewed it slightly for a moment before swallowing it. From the looks of it, this 14th young master had truly been exhausted quite heavily the 2 days and 2 nights. The more he saw how the 14th young master was like this, the more he did not find the situation funny. Instead, his heart was filled with shock and terror. What kind of existence was the 14th young master? Without any exaggeration, even if he did not eat or drink for a whole year, nothing would happen to him. There was no way that he would reach such a state from that. Moreover, with the 14th young master's cultivation, he could easily breathe through the pores on his skin and absorb energy from the outside. As long as he wanted to drink water, he only needed to revolve his cultivation a little, and he would be able to suck enough water from the air around him. Even if he was buried in the ground, he would still be able to drink the sweetest spring waters without moving a finger. But for him to be so thirsty and hungry to this extent, this meant that in the last 2 days and 2 nights, he'd been expending all his strength almost constantly, until he broke the defense of his enemy and smashed him apart. Even then, he could not rest and could only save some energy to await the next round of violent attacks. In those 2 days and 2 nights, The 9 nether 14th young master had been in the absolute advantageous position. But against an opponent like this that wouldn't die no matter what method was used, there was completely no meaning in having the advantage. At best, it would only ensure that he would not be killed by his opponent. Apart from that, there were no other solutions. Just what kind of terrifying creature was this? Ah! If it wasn't the 9 nether 14th young master, there was no way anyone would be able to endure to this point. In fact, it would be a problem to retreat unharmed. Fortunately, it was the 9 nether 14th young master that discovered this creature first. Right now, even Jun Moxie was shocked to a completely speechless degree. All of a sudden, a loud boom rang out, coupled with Gu Han's enraged roar. It's you! It's you! It's actually you! You sinner of the continent! Wretched thing that deserves 1,000,000 deaths, this daddy will. Jun Moxie and the 9 nether 14th young master instantly whirled their heads around to look at Gu Han. So Gu Han actually knew this monster? The monster did not say anything and simply continued to endure Gu Han's frenzied attacks, looking for a chance to break past Gu Han and dive into the joint army tens of li away. But Gu Han also seemed to have gone mad in that instant as he attacked without care for his life. He roared repeatedly, the veins on his face twitching. Jun Moxie could clearly see that Gu Han's eyes had already turned as red as blood. Who is he? Jun Moxie asked. Even the 9 nether 14th young master stopped eating as he looked at Gu Han. That is the 9 Illusory Quicksand. The 9 Illusory Quicksand at the 3 Holy Lands had accumulated for 10,000 years. Gu Han sounded as though he was crying. This wretched bastard actually used the 9 Illusory Quicksand to reconstruct this body. This bastard. This crazy son of a beach. It's actually Zhan Kuang. Jun Moxie also jumped up with shock as he looked with disbelief at the exceedingly ugly creature that had no face. This is Zhan Kuang. Zhan Luanhui. Could he have used the 9 Illusory Quicksand to reconstruct his body after escaping from the volcano and left with no choice? But, how could this be possible? Zhan Kuang. Isn't Zhan Kuang one of the 8 personal disciples of the misty illusory manners Miao Qing Cheng? Half a piece of meat dangled outside the 9 nether 14th young master's mouth as he asked with disbelief. He's actually not dead? Without waiting for Jun Moxie to answer, he sighed. No wonder he was so difficult to deal with. So it's him. No wonder. Truthfully, Gu Han was not the only person that was in a rage right now. Ever since Jun Moxie and Gu Han appeared, the monster had not made a single sound. But when Gu Han accidentally exposed his true identity and flew into a rage, it also made a strange sound. Since it didn't have a face, it naturally did not have a mouth as well. One truly wonder how it makes its sound. That growl that came from its throat was actually also filled with indescribable hatred and anger. This monster was naturally Zhan Kuang, and also Zhan Luanhui, the main sinner who caused the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to collapse. At this time, there were also unspeakable rage and frustration in Zhan Kuang's heart. He'd single-handedly destroyed Mount Heaven's Saint and caused the disaster of the continent. And he'd also destroyed the 3 Holy Lands, drawing the hatred of the 3 Holy Lands. But at the same time, he'd also been pushed into a volcano by Jun Moxie and the combined forces of the 3 Holy Lands, having his body completely vanquished and unrecoverable. Although his spirit was still alive and could barely take on a human form, but it was in essence just a puff of smoke. Zhan Kuang was also incredibly enraged. Truthfully, the reason he'd ended up like this was also completely his own doing. Unless he had a choice. he would definitely not use the 9 illusory quicksand as material to cast a new body. The 9 illusory quicksand was a natural treasure and had countless uses. But it was ultimately not the same as a body of blood and flesh, born from a mother who'd held the baby for 9 months. Compared to a real human body, the 9 illusory quicksand had many more extra functions. However, it had lost even more functions. And the most important thing was that the 9 illusory quicksand that he'd stolen away this time was an extremely precious thing that the Jun family had coveted for over 10,000 years. The 9 illusory quicksand was something that the misty illusory manor could not do without, to maintain its normal operations. As long as one had control over this treasure, it would be equivalent to having grasped onto the throat of the entire misty illusory manor. Having ownership of it was the same as having ownership of the leading position of the misty illusory manor. So this thing was much more important to the Jun family. If Shan Kuang did not care about the Jun family so much, why would he plot so painstakingly for over 8,000 years? If he hadn't been left with no choice, why would he use such precious and irreplaceable materials to construct his body? The reason was simply because he didn't have any other choice. If he didn't use it, his soul would dissipate and die. After 10,000 years, he'd finally managed to obtain the 9 illusory quicksand. Yet, he was forced to use it to construct a fleshly body. How could Shan Kuang not feel angry? How could he not feel aggrieved? On top of that, even though he'd managed to keep his life with the 9 illusory quicksand, it didn't mean that everything was fine. Because of the unique nature of the 9 illusory quicksand, even though his spirit was now very safe, he was no longer a human. An empty shell that did not have any human characteristics, any sense of touch, smell, taste, hearing, and sight, could not be considered a human, right? He was just a monster. Although Shan Kuang was a peak expert, he was still a man at the end of the day. He would still feel an impulse for that kind of thing. But after using the 9 illusory quicksand, even if his heart was aflame with desire, that thing below would not budge at all. Well, it seemed that he didn't even have that thing below. If he didn't even have a face, how would he have such an intricate and profound organ? The only thing that was left was the unquenchable fire in his heart, and the memory of those wonderful feelings in his mind. It was also easily imaginable how when this fellow was hungry, he would shove a bunch of food into his mouth, only to feel that his stomach felt strange. Yet, he couldn't let the food exit in the normal way, and he would have no choice but to dig open his stomach and take all the food out in its original form. Anyone who encountered such matters, even if it was a mere bystander, would be unable to accept the feeling, right? Moreover, the 9 illusory quicksand was a nearly completely transparent material. If he drank a few cups of water, one could even see the water rocking about in his stomach. He was like a human-shaped glass container that was much more sturdier and wouldn't easily shatter. Even if he was shattered, he could form himself back together in a short time. So when he received even more blame from Gu Han, Shan Kuang was so depressed that he nearly went crazy. Do you think I wanted to use this dang thing? I still want to be a human as well. However, it was you guys that forced me to a point where I can't even be a human. The most horrible thing was, you all forced me to lose even my qualifications for being a man. And now, you still want to admonish me for using the 9 illusory quicksand to cast a body? If he hadn't destroyed the pillar of heaven's mountains and caused everyone to die or flee from the area, he would still have been able to easily find a human body in this area and possess it first. Then, he could look for more options later on. But after he stole all the 9 illusory quicksand away, causing the pillar of heaven's mountains to collapse and setting off all the volcanoes in the area, This place had become a completely desolate land without a single human, apart from the experts of the three holy lands. And after the three holy lands were destroyed, the people there also completely threw away all their inhibitions. Nearly everyone had reported to the battlefield. Indeed, since they didn't even have a home that they could return to, was there still a need for them to station people to look after the home? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1214. Fascinating 9 Illusory Quicksand. So after drifting around for a few days, Zhang Kuang finally could not hold on any longer. Either his spirit dissipated, or he took that last step. And this was still with Zhang Kuang's foundations being so strong. If he wasn't stranded in this place where the heat and humidity were so terrible, with the strength of his soul, it wouldn't be a problem for him to endure for 10,000 li, finding a human to possess. However, there were only volcanoes all around him, and the temperature was high to a shocking amount. Even in places where the volcanoes had not erupted, the ground was still so hot that one could cook an egg on the stones within a few blinks of the eye. Souls could endure all kinds of cold without much adverse effects. However, they could not stand this kind of extreme high temperatures. Furthermore, the air was poisonous, slowly corroding his soul. And so, Zhang Kuang discovered to his horror that there was no possibility of him walking out of this place. Left with no choice, the desperate Zhang Kuang finally reached into the space within his soul and took out the 9 illusory quicksand that he'd obtained with great efforts. Then, after nearly exhausting all his remaining soul energy, he made a human-shaped figure and jumped into the body. After that, he spent another 2 days and 2 nights merging his soul with it, finally managing to succeed. However, the results of that fusing caused Zhang Kuang to directly crumble with grief. There was no way that he wouldn't crumble. This body could grudgingly be considered human-shaped, but the head was nothing but an empty decoration. There was no face, no nose, no mouth, no eyes, and no ears. In any case, there was nothing on his head at all. What the hell was this? As for the more intricate things like the 5 viscera and 6 bowels, the complex meridians of the human body, and the most important **zul organ for a man, all of that was absent as well. In that case, could his body still be called a body? Can he still be considered a human? In that moment of despair, Zhang Kuang hurriedly came up with a solution. This was not a completely hopeless situation. What he lacked right now were the most intricate features of a human body, and those naturally needed a long time to create. If he wanted to forcefully have these things, he would need to have a large supply of essence blood. Then, with some dark techniques, he could still grow those features. What he lacked the most right now was humans. Huge amounts of humans. The problem was that this entire area of 10,000 li had already turned into a land of desolation. How many living beings would there be in this place for him to absorb their life's essence? If he exceeded a certain time limit, and the 9 illusory quicksands cast became fixed, he would remain in this form forever. How could the proud and self-centered Zhang Kuang bear this? Left with no other choice, he began to feed on corpses, forcefully holding back the disgust in his heart. Although this body didn't have such reflexes, his soul had already become used to this kind of feeling after so many years. How could it be something that is easy to change? Moreover, this was still the putrid and rotting wild beast corpses that had been barbecued by the intense heat. Just as Zhang Kuang finished stealing his heart and forced himself to feed on those 2 indescribably disgusting wild beast corpses, the 9 nether 14th young master suddenly showed up. Seeing such a sight, The 9 nether 14th young master jumped with shock, cursed at him for being a disgusting monster, and began to attack him. Zhang Kuang happened to be in an exceedingly frustrated moment of his life, and getting suddenly attacked without provocation, his rage rose to the heavens as well. Without a second word, the two began their long and fierce battle. After fighting for so many days, he was truthfully still rather confused as to what was going on. Although Zhang Kuang had managed to infer that his attacker was the 9 nether 14th young master based on the techniques that the other was using, he still didn't know why that fellow was attacking him. Even if I look a little disgusting right now, you shouldn't kill me just because of that, right? How have I offended you? Feck. Is being ugly a crime too? You think I want to look this way? Even more depressing was that if he was in his peak state, his strength would definitely be higher than the 9 nether 14th young masters, by quite a bit as well. Although he wouldn't be able to do much to the latter, he still wouldn't be chased around and beaten like a dog. He would be able to fight and leave as he wished. But right now, he was being suppressed so badly that he didn't have the ability to fight back. Furthermore, every once in a while, he would have his body destroyed and scattered. If not for the unique indestructible qualities of the 9 illusory quicksand, he would have already died long ago. As for the 9 nether 14th young master who had the advantage all along, he was similarly depressed as well. This was originally just a minor task in his mind, and he planned to finish off this monster in a short time, make his way to the battlefield and enjoy the exciting fight while sitting atop a mountain, drinking wine and playing a little tune. If he felt like it, he could go down and join in for the fun. According to his logic, how much strength could a random monster he met on the way be? The number of monsters he'd slayed in passing throughout his life was so much that they could be counted. Who would have thought that this monster was so weird? It was one thing for it to have great battling strength, but it actually couldn't be killed. Until finally, even a strong-willed person like him was nearly at his limits. Reforming after being broken, without losing even a bit of strength. Truthfully, even Zhang Kuang did not know that the 9 illusory quicksand had such amazing qualities as well. The first time his body was destroyed, he thought that everything was over this time. Even he hadn't expected that he would actually revive again. After suffering through so many depressing situations, only this point gave Zhang Kuang a pleasant surprise and some comfort. Perhaps he would be truly invincible from now on. However, to live forever in this form was still too uncomfortable. If the most basic function of a man was lost, it would be a wonder if he could feel comfortable. In that moment, Gu Han was roaring with rage, every blow resounding like thunder, moving faster and faster. Finally, after a long chain of banging sounds, Zhang Kuang's half-transparent body once again shattered into a cloud of green mist. After that round of intense fight, Gu Han's old face was also lined with sweat. The current Gu Han's strength was inferior to 9 nether 14th young master by quite a bit. If it was the old Gu Han before his cultivation dropped, even if he would still not be able to compare with the 9 nether 14th young master, he would not be weaker by much. But right now, he was quite a distance from the 9 nether 14th young master. Old Gu, let me try. Perhaps I might have a method to get rid of this pest. Jun Moxie's eyes shone with a cold light. With a flip of his hand, a ball of black fire burst into life on his palm. The flame of primal chaos. This was the flame of primal chaos that could burn all things. And it was also what Jun Moxie considered to be the most effective method to deal with this situation. At the same time, he felt that it would be the best way to thoroughly destroy Zhang Kuang. Right now, Zhang Kuang's body had turned into a clump of green mist. hanging helplessly in the air like a lamb for the slaughter. This was a heavenly God-given opportunity. If he didn't take action now, when would he do so? For a monster like this that couldn't be killed, could revive endlessly without losing any battle strength, was unharmed by water, fire, blade, or spear, and could even consume the flesh and blood of other creatures to improve its strength. It was better to finish it off as quickly as possible. Apart from the flame of primal chaos, Jun Moxie could not think of a better way to deal with this monster. He could only place his hopes on the flame of primal chaos that had never failed before. The only question now was whether the flame of primal chaos would remain as invincible as before, encountered by anything. The moment Gu Han saw that ghostly black flame, his face instantly changed, and he hopped to the side. Although he knew that the black fire would not be directed against him, he was still afraid that he would accidentally touch even a tiny spark from it. Gu Han knew the terrifying power of this fire extremely well. Just several days ago, Jun Moxie had dropped this same fire into a pit filled with extremely rare essence of ice. And even then, the ice could not cause it to pause even a little bit, or extinguish the black flames at all. Every single one of the 40 experts in the pit had died, without a single one managing to escape. Finally, even their bodies and souls were thoroughly burned away. No matter how unkillable Zhang Kuang was or how indestructible his body was, he would definitely still be turned into ashes with this barbaric fire. With a wave of his hand, the flame of primal chaos turned into tiny specks of fire, slowly drifting towards green mist. Following that, he began to retreat rapidly as well. The 9 Nether 14th young master and Gu Han widened their eyes, looking at the situation with hope. As long as this monster was alive, no one would be able to rest in peace. Although this monster was not too hard to deal with now and could be shattered apart if one had sufficient strength, the greatest problem was that there were no ways to truly kill it. If one continued struggling with it like this, then no matter how powerful one was, they would eventually be exhausted to death. After all, this monster could revive on the spot endlessly, without losing anything. Everyone watched intently, and even Jun Moxie's face was filled with uncertainty. But after some time, the 3 of them all revealed looks of disbelief. The 9 Nether 14th young master had also witnessed the power of the flame of primal chaos before, and naturally also placed huge expectations on it. But right now, his face was also filled with disappointment. The truth was right before his eyes. The green mist was still floating there without any changes, and the flame of primal chaos was falling right through it, still burning radiantly without any changes. However, the green mist seemed to be able to completely ignore it. Although the flame of primal chaos was still burning as per normal, the green mist still hung in the sky, as if the two had nothing to do with each other. Jun Moxie's eyeballs nearly dropped out of his eyes. What was going on? Could it be that the flame of primal chaos could also fail? The flame of primal chaos was a flame that could burn everything in the world, including the air and souls. Why can't it burn that god-danged green mist? Jun Moxie furrowed his brows and looked at Gu Han. Old Gu, dare I ask, what kind of thing is that 9 illusory quicksand? What kind of energy is it wary of? Or rather, what can destroy the 9 illusory quicksand? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1215. Super Medium. Gu Han looked at the black flames in the sky with a despondent expression on his face. The 9 illusory quicksand is a godly material, and its origins are mysterious and unclear. No one really knows much about it. As for what its uses are, I'm not too certain as well. I only know that the 9 illusory quicksand is an indispensable material to maintain the misty illusory manor's space. Although they don't need a lot, it is something that they cannot do without. From this direction, it can be determined that the 9 illusory quicksand should be a material that corresponds to spatial energy. As for what it is exactly, I really don't know. Has something to do with space? Jun Moxie furrowed his brows. Just what is this 9 illusory quicksand thing? Young Master Jun naturally would not know that although the flame of primal chaos was a heavenly fire that could burn everything, this 9 illusory quicksand was not a low-grade material either. It was also formed from the heavens and earth. Of course, this natural material was a result of the 9 Nether First Young Master using a type of extreme and heaven-defying method, along with a formation to lock the heavenly essence chi to form. It could be considered as a kind of man-made sentient material. Although the flame of primal chaos was capable of burning even space and spirits, this 9 illusory quicksand was also not weaker than the flame of primal chaos in the quality of its energy. At most, there would only be a tiny thread of difference. As for Gu Han's analysis if it being a spatial type material, he was not exactly wrong as well. Because the 9 illusory quicksand was a type of medium or intermediary material for creating spatial pockets. There was a concept in Buddhist scriptures: a world in a grain of sand. And this 9 illusory quicksand was exactly this kind of material. Although it was far from being as overpowered as being able to contain an entire world in a grain of sand, it was also similarly miraculous. Even if it was just a single grain of sand, it still had endless fascinating uses. Otherwise, how would a small pinch of this 9 illusory quicksand maintain the space of the misty illusory manor for so long? And right now, Zhang Kuang had used all the 9 illusory quicksand that existed in this world to create his body. So the energy contained in this body could be easily imagined. Right now, Zhang Kuang could be said to have not even discovered a tenth of the uses of the 9 illusory quicksand. And he was already so terrifying. As Jun Moxie was mulling over the matter, the flame of primal chaos still burned as before, but the greenish mist was retreating ever so slowly. After that, it began to drift to the side, away from the flame of primal chaos before once again swirling into a green human form. A loud whooshing sound rang out. As expected, Zhang Kuang was going to revive again. Jun Moxie furrowed his brows and with a wave of his hand, the flame of primal chaos disappeared. Since it didn't work, there was no need to leave it outside. This thing did not distinguish between friend and foe. If Gu Han or the 9 Nether 14th Young Master touched it, even if they reacted immediately, they would still lose a layer of skin even if they didn't die. Right now, young Master Jun was also exceedingly depressed. The flame of primal chaos that had never failed before actually disappointed him for the first time today. This was a very difficult blow for Jun Moxie to accept. Since even the flame of primal chaos could not destroy it, then what other methods were there that could deal with this undying monster? The whooshing sound grew louder and faster, and a human figure once again appeared before the three of them like a persistent ghost. Let me try this time. I'll like to personally get a taste of what kind of monster this is. The two of you, get ready in case of anything. A rarely seen look of seriousness appeared on Jun Moxie's face as he charged forward before the two could answer. A loud hong sound rang out, and in the instant that Zhang Kuang's body solidified, Jun Moxie's palm smashed firmly against his chest. The newly reformed Zhang Kuang basically did not have any time to react as he was sent stumbling backwards for tens of zhang. Unable to maintain his footing, he tumbled head over heels, falling ruthlessly across the ground. Jun Xie had intentionally slowed down the speed of this palm, but he'd increased the attack's strength. As expected, this fellow is weak at the point when he initially takes form. Whether it is the speed or reaction, all of it is not coordinated. Jun Xie thought as he sent out a flurry of attacks. After being hit dozens of times, Zhang Kuang's body reaction grew increasingly nimble, and his counterattacks became sharper as well. However, his body was already showing signs of turning illusory. Seeing this, Jun Xie narrowed his eyes and increased the speed of attack further, and the sounds of fists and kicks rang out repeatedly. A look of astonishment shone in the 14th young master's eyes as he looked at the exciting battle. When he first saw Jun Xie at Chrysanthemum City, Jun Xie was only a saint. But in less than half a year, when the evil monarch manor was just established, this fellow had already reached the Saint Venerable realm. But now, he'd once again jumped to the peak of the Saint Monarch realm. What kind of advancement speed was this? Such a shocking speed caused even the 14th young master to feel shock and horror. The first time he saw Jun Xie, the kid was only akin to an ant in his sight. But now, this fellow had already reached a level where he had the qualifications to converse equally with him. In that case, what if some more time passed? How would the two sides' strengths compare? A smile suddenly appeared on the 14th young master's face. Perhaps, this world will not be as boring anymore with the addition of another strong rival. In this battle, Jun Xie held the absolute advantage, fiercely suppressing his opponent the entire way, seeking to destroy Zhang Kuang in the shortest time possible. Zhang Kuang's body also continuously trembled under the attacks, seemingly about to break down once again. All of a sudden, Jun Xie retracted his palm and a shrill sword cry rang out as the blood of yellow flames stabbed with the speed of lightning, plunging into Zhang Kuang's body. It directly stabbed into the position of Zhang Kuang's dantian. Then, he stepped aside and watched. He wanted to see whether this sword could control Zhang Kuang, whether it could do any damage to the strange monster. After all, both of them were things that surpassed the understanding of this world. The blood of yellow flame cried out with excitement and spun rapidly against Zhang Kuang's dantian. With the blood of yellow flame's sharpness, a huge hole appeared on Zhang Kuang's chest. From the outside, one could see the blood of yellow flame stabbing into the dantian, suddenly piercing upwards towards the position where the heart normally was, and then upwards again, towards the head. Following that, it dove downwards, slashing about madly in his body. It was as if blood of yellow flame was looking for something, but it couldn't find it. Zhang Kuang shrieked aloud continuously, and his body once again began to dissipate. Just at this time, a brilliant light burst out as the blood of yellow flame released its sword qi without restraint, bursting through Zhang Kuang's body. With a loud bang, Zhang Kuang's body exploded, turning into a cloud of green mist again. The blood of yellow flame flew about the air, returning to Jun Xie's hand. In that moment, the blood of yellow flame's voice echoed in Jun Xie's mind. What kind of thing is this fellow? Why is his soul so strange? I actually can't absorb it at all. The soul cannot be absorbed. Jun Xie raised his eyebrows with shock. Then, can you absorb his body? Whether it was Zhang Kuang's soul or the 9 illusory quicksand that made up his body, as long as one of them could be destroyed, the other would naturally become vulnerable. It can't either. What is that thing? Why is it so strange? The blood of yellow flame grumbled unhappily. What's wrong? Jun Xie instantly detected that the blood of yellow flame's emotions were strange. That thing is a heavenly nutritious material. Ah! Blood of Yellow Flame grumbled. I was so excited just now. But after trying to eat it, I realized that that thing cannot even be absorbed. How frustrating. A nutritious material? What do you mean? Jun Moxie's eyes lit up. How is it nutritious? You wouldn't understand even if I explained the details to you. Put simply, if you could add a little bit of that stuff when you refine me next time. I don't need that much. Just about a tenth of what we have on that guy. My strength will rise by at least 1-fold. Perhaps even more. The Blood of Yellow Flame sighed. But it's a pity, from the looks of things now. I'm afraid it would be hard. As it said that, the Blood of Yellow Flame sighed again in a human-like manner. Jun Moxie also sighed along with it. It was indeed quite hard. This thing was indestructible. Since it could not be killed, there was even less meaning in talking about adding it to the sword. If Zhang Kuang's soul could not be extinguished, Jun Moxie also wouldn't dare to add the material into the sword. What kind of a terrifying existence was Zhang Kuang's soul? If it ended up swallowing the Blood of Yellow Flame's soul instead, it would be even more troublesome. However, this thing is also very useful to you. The next words from the Blood of Yellow Flame caused Jun Moxie to shudder. From what I know, the kind of energy you use to forge me also contains similar effects to energy used to create spatial pockets. And this strange material seems to have some similarities to that energy of yours. Furthermore, it should be a rather high-grade intermediary medium. High-grade medium. Jun Moxie instantly turned to look at Zhang Kuang's body with a greedy expression. It was as if a particularly desperate hoodlum had just spotted a beautiful woman walking alone. Jun Moxie knew what exactly he lacked the most. Although his cultivation was undoubtedly rising quickly, but the individual space in his body that he'd created with the art of unlocking heaven's fortune had not changed at all. It still only remained as a sky and earth, and a patch of chaos. There weren't even a sun, moon, or stars in there. Since there weren't any changes there, it meant that the art of unlocking heaven's fortune had not made any further progress. And if the art of unlocking heaven's fortune didn't progress, then even if he stuffed his body to the point of explosion with spiritual qi, he wouldn't be able to advance any further. What had progressed so far was only his Xian cultivation. But as for the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, it hadn't broken through yet. If he wanted to reach the next level with the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, he would need a type of opportunity. And now that the Blood of Yellow Flame had mentioned the word medium, it instantly caused Jun Moxie's heart to light up. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1216. Devour. Jun Moxie instantly made a link in his mind. Could it be that I was lacking this kind of medium? The way that Jun Moxie looked at Zhang Kuang now was as if he was Pigsy from Journey to the West, looking at a ginseng fruit. That kind of eyes caused even the 9-14th young master to feel a shiver travel down his spine. It's a little too ambiguous, isn't it? However, Jun Moxie did not dare to make any light moves. Because Zhang Kuang's soul still existed within this thing. If he accidentally brought this fellow fully intact into the Hongjun Pagoda, it wasn't clear what kind of accident it would result in. After all, this fellow was great at messing things up. It was better to take the cautious route. But the question remained. How should he proceed from here? How could he separate the two elements? Jun Moxie creased his brows and looked at the mist in the air, continuing to ruminate. What should he do to pry that fellow's soul out? Seeing that Zhang Kuang's body had once again began to congeal back into a human form, Jun Moxie suddenly moved, his body disappearing instantly. He moved so fast that even the blood of yellow flame did not have time to return as it hovered about on the same spot. The 14th young master and Gu Han looked around with shock, not knowing what young master Jun was doing. Could it be that this kid suddenly had a change of heart and decided to run away in fear? It can't be, right? In the next moment, a cloud of water vapor materialized suddenly in the air, slowly covering an area of over 1,000 zhang. Then, they gathered and formed around the green mist. Then, the vapor condensed quickly into countless water droplets, before beginning to freeze. Still, the green mist remained completely unaffected by the drop in temperature around it. It continued to float languidly within the ice without any change. Jun Moxie's body once again appeared, and with a snap of his fingers, an extreme chill surged out, and the newly formed ice rapidly hardened into Xian ice. This was the first time that the 14th young master had seen such a shocking thing, and he couldn't help but to rub his eyes with disbelief. But when he opened his eyes again, he received an even bigger shock. The Xian ice that was there before no longer existed, because it had already turned into essence of ice. Essence of ice. It was actually essence of ice? The 14th young master felt as if he was about to faint. This was an incredibly rare natural treasure that was difficult to find even in thousands of years. But it had actually formed so easily right in front of his eyes. Furthermore, it was formed with the power of a human, in such a short time. Of course, the 14th young master did not know that Jun Moxie had once again used the power of the Hongjun Pagoda. If he wanted to instantly turn water into essence of ice, it was impossible if he wanted to rely on his own power. The essence of ice was completely transparent, and although the green mist was still able to move, and there was even a small part that had already successfully floated out, it was obvious that its speed had clearly slowed down greatly within the essence of ice. With a wave of his hand, the blood of yellow flame floated into his hand. Jun Moxie did not hesitate, and in the instant that the green mist slowed down, he focused all his spirit energy into the blood of yellow flame and slashed down. The instant that the sword was thrusted out, its might reached a level as ferocious as if the heavens were breaking apart. Jun Moxie's target was precisely a corner of this essence of ice. There weren't a lot of green mist in this corner of the ice, and it was at most only 5% of the total amount. With a schwa sound, the blade came into direct contact against the essence of ice. In that moment, a burst of colors appeared, and without any pause, the corner of the essence of ice was sliced off. The instant it was chopped off, a strange hoarse cry rang out from the green mist, and a white shadow flew out instantly. Behind it, the green mist that was trapped within the essence of ice also seemed to be trying to flee with all its might. Jun Moxie pointed with his finger, and the blood of yellow flame slashed down quickly onto the weak white shadow. At the same time, Jun Moxie waved his hand, and the essence of ice that had been chopped off also disappeared, taken by him into the Hongjun Pagoda. As for the white shadow, it suddenly let out a soundless wretched cry that shook one's soul, as blood of yellow flame slashed through it. In that instant, it split into 3 sections, and 2 of the 3 sections instantly fled hurriedly. As for the last section, in the instant that it came into contact with the sword, the blood of yellow flame shone brightly, having prepared itself long ago to swallow the white shadow completely. As for the remaining green mist within the essence of ice, it suddenly vibrated madly, and with a few loud crackling sounds and a bang, the huge essence of ice directly burst apart, and the green mist instantly gathered together with a speed that far surpassed its earlier relaxed manner. Then, with a shrill whooshing sound, it shot through the air. Before one had the chance to blink, it was already gone. A speed akin to a bolt of lightning was so instantaneous that even the 14th young master and Jun Moxie did not have the time to stop it. Just as the three were looking at each other in a dumbfounded manner and unable to react, a myriad of colors suddenly burst out of the blood of Yellow Flame's body. The colors were so dazzling that the three could scarcely keep their eyes open. Then, with a cry that seemed to be filled with pain, the entire sword trembled intensely. That bit of shadow earlier, although little, was a portion of Zhang Kuang's soul. His soul had been scattered among the 9 illusory quicksand after his body was broken apart. Once it was sealed with the essence of ice, his soul was also naturally stuck in many different parts. The risky slash that Jun Moxie had done was calculated based on the premise that the soul's consciousness was unable to react due to being partially frozen with the essence of ice. In the end, he'd managed to forcefully slice off a small portion of Zhang Kuang's soul. The blood of Yellow Flame's attack was also precisely on the point. It had immediately began to swallow the instant that it touched Zhang Kuang's soul, thoroughly cutting off its escape paths. The only thing was that Zhang Kuang's half-sage level soul was indeed extremely tough. In the instant that he noticed that something was wrong, he managed to make a swift decision, tearing his broken soul apart into 3 sections, allowing for 2 sections to escape. As for the violent reaction from the blood of Yellow Flame, it was a backlash from swallowing just that little bit of Zhang Kuang's soul. Such an intense reaction had scared even Jun Moxie. The blood of Yellow Flame had swallowed Ji Bo Wen's, who was a 2nd-level Saint Monarch without any problems at all. But just a fraction of Zhang Kuang's half-sage soul had resulted in such a heavy backlash. Enough for the fraction of soul to vie for controlling rights with the blood of Yellow Flame's sword spirit. Jun Moxie snorted and grabbed the sword's hilt, instantly infusing his extremely pure art of unlocking heaven's fortune spiritual qi into the sword. With the timely reinforcement to its sword spirit, the light around the blood of Yellow Flame instantly grew more dazzling. A moment later, a bright sword cry rang out, and a ball of sword qi shot out from the sword's tip, blasting through the cloudy sky, disappearing without a trace. The blood of Yellow Flame's childish voice rang out again in Jun Moxie's mind. How close? How is that fellow's soul that strong? This sword almost suffered a huge disadvantage from being taken by surprise. Jun Moxie seemed to be able to see the image of a 7, 8 years old young master wiping sweat off his brows with a faint smile. Shaking his head, he also breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Luckily, he hadn't acted foolishly and taken the entire essence of ice statue into the Hongjun Pagoda. From the looks of it, if that fellow really managed to enter the Hongjun Pagoda, he might even be able to wrestle the controlling rights of the Hongjun Pagoda from him. And from the looks of it, he might even really lose to him. Just 1% of the full soul was so strong that the blood of Yellow Flame could not overcome with its own strength. This Zhang Kuang was truly a little too powerful. Jun Moxie thought about it and nodded. That fellow was an old monster that had lived for over 10,000 years after all. How strong was the soul of a 10,000 years old monster? There was no need to even think about such a question. Moreover, he was even the 9 first young master's grand disciple. If he wasn't at least this strong, it would instead be strange. The 9 14th young master and Gu Han, these 2 experts were simply staring blankly as they observed the strange development. The both of them looked at young Master Jun in a lost manner, both of them utterly confused. What's going on here? Wasn't Zhang Kuang's incarnate, the green mist, unable to move just now. How come it managed to move again in an instant? And it even moved with a speed akin to lightning? It was actually so fast that they were unable to even react. That was too strange. The two of them naturally wouldn't know that Zhang Kuang had actually felt a life-threatening sense of danger earlier and directly used a method that ignited the soul, provoking all the potential in his body to break out of the essence of ice and escape. Although the blood of yellow flame had only swallowed less than 1% of his soul, the damage it caused was actually a long-lasting one. Although Zhang Kuang could temporarily move at the speed of lightning, the moment the strength granted by this secret technique was used up, he would fall back down. Furthermore, his strength would drop by a large margin. With him escaping like this now, it will be unclear when we will ever get a chance to catch him again. Gu Han sighed. If he consumed large amounts of essence blood and recreates the human organs, regaining the proper functions of a human body, Zhang Kuang's strength would undoubtedly reach the point where he'd be at the peak of all his lives. At that time, the continent would once again sink into danger. One that is likely even more serious than our current danger. The 9th young master also nodded deeply with agreement. Jun Moxie similarly felt somewhat heavy in his heart. No matter what, we can only take things one step at a time. It's more important to deal with the large battle before us right now. The matters in the future can be discussed again later. At the same time, he mused in his heart. That fellow's soul is not even complete right now. Can he still recover to the peak? Gu Han and the 9th young master sighed together and nodded. That was the only solution right now. Inside the Hongjun Pagoda, Jun Moxie had just moved the chunk of essence of ice into the 6th level of the Hongjun Pagoda. Right now, it was being dissolved slowly. Countless primal chaos purple chi surrounded the essence of ice, probing it and breaking it apart. Jun Moxie was waiting and also looking forward to the results. Could the Hongjun Pagoda turn this little patch of green mist back into the original form of the 9 illusory quicksand? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1217. Grand Battle begins. If it could be returned to its original form, what amazing effects would the 9 illusory quicksand create? Would it stimulate the advancement of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune? Still, no matter what the results are, from the current state of the Hongjun Pagoda, it was obvious that this would not be a task that could be completed in a short time. It would definitely require quite a bit of patience. And what were the consequences that would result from Zhang Kuang escaping? Of course, all these were things that remained in the unknown future. The three did not say anything, each ruminating on their own thoughts as they walked. The 9th young master was deep in thought, not even noticing that he was actually following Jun Moxie to the Tian Fa army campsite. Jun Moxie secretly felt a smug satisfaction in his heart. Yet another super expert had delivered himself to the door. Kakik, with the addition of the 9th young master, there was more hope for this battle. In that instant, shrill cries rang out from the distance, from the Xian cranes that had been stationed several thousand li away. The sounds from Tian Nan's direction became much more chaotic, and all of a sudden, the ground began to shake intensely. The attack that the strange races had delayed for so long had finally begun. After a long pause, the battle had once again restarted. Jun Moxie and the rest was prepared to face the enemy, but their faces still could not help but change. The three of them had just not expected that the strange races' attack would actually be so fierce. There were no probing attacks at all, and there were no warnings at all. Far away, a heaven-shaking chorus of roars rang out, and a powerful tremor surged through the ground. The dark sky trembled, and the stars blinked with fright as the killing intent soared into the sky. Brothers, this battle is not being fought for so-called glory. This battle is not being fought for humankind. This battle is for our brothers. Let us use the sharp blades in our hands and tear those strange races freaks apart. Ha ha ha, hasn't our bitter training of so many years been for this day? Kill. Let us kill until the heavens and the earth are overturned. Solitary Eagle's voice rang out, loud and cold, filled with indifference and pride. His voice carried a heavy bloodlust, a heroic air that could paint even the sky red. Ha ha ha. Another chorus of laughs rang out from the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer army. That's right. We want to kill until the heavens and earth are overturned, until blood flows like a river. Feng Huanyun roared as the sword in his hand flew into the sky like a huge dragon, radiating a fearsome and dazzling light that was clearly visible from hundreds of li away. Kill! 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 Kill those strange races until the heavens and earth are overturned, until blood flows like a river. The voices of 300 warriors rang out together. In that moment, countless resplendent blade light burst into the sky, reflecting the cold and indifferent moonlight. Solitary Eagle held a custom long saber made for the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer army, and with a swift slash, four strange races' heads flew high into the sky, the blood from their necks spurting like a fountain. Standing within the fountain of blood, Solitary Eagle roared with laughter. I've killed 9 strange races freaks already. How many have you all killed? Right now, this captain will declare the start of this competition between our 2 troops. The troop that kills the most in the end will be the winner. The losers will have to bark like a dog in front of everyone. How is that? Feng Huanyun. You old bastard. Prepare to bark like a dog. Ha ha ha. Feng Huanyun's sword flashed like lightning, fierce and smooth like a wild hurricane. Everywhere his sword passed by, at least 4 or 5 enemy would drop. Laughing aloud, he scoffed. Solitary Eagle. We will accept this competition. However, the ones who will be barking like dogs after this will be you. Brothers, do you want to hear Solitary Eagle bark like a dog? Yes. Ha ha ha. The Spirit Devourer team that was led by Feng Huanyun instantly roared with excitement. Then, what are you all still waiting for? Since you want to hear it, then hurry up and kill. Feng Huanyun laughed and raised his hand, roaring. Kill! 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 The Spirit Devourer warriors roared, raising their blades as they charged towards the strange races. Their faces were filled with excitement and hunger, as if they were a group of wolves that had been starved for 3 days and 3 nights, suddenly meeting an all-you-can-eat buffet. Feck! Solitary Eagle cursed and spat. Brothers, let's charge too. If those Spirit Devourer fellows really win, all of us will no longer have any face left. I'll rather die than lose face. Let's kill quickly, otherwise, we will not have any targets left to kill. Ha ha ha, the captain is right. We'll rather die than lose face. Everyone, let's kill quickly, the slow ones will not be able to get anything. The Heaven Destroyer team laughed and brandished their blades as they charged forward. These 2 powerful troops had actually made this cruel battlefield into a competitive game. Everyone's fighting strength had all been raised to the peak in an instant. They were as if a pair of sharp choppers cutting through vegetables. Solitary Eagle and Feng Huanyun's method to raise morale had indeed achieved amazing effects. As the huge battle began, A grand cacophony of wretched cries, crazed laughters, fearsome howls, and enraged roars rang out continuously. Limbs and heads flew everywhere, continuously tossed high into the sky. Broken bodies could be seen everywhere, and fresh blood soaked the ground. In the instant that the battle started, the battlefield had already reached an extremely feverish peak. In that moment, a powerful tiger's roar rang out, stirring up a huge gale. Tiger King Earthcracker's stalwart body was like an unbreakable steel tower as he charged around the battlefield wildly. Before he reached an area, his voice had already reached there. When it comes to killing, who is comparable to our Tian Fa tiger tribe? You can include our tiger tribe in this bet as well. Little kids, do you have the confidence to compare with them on who will kill more strange race freaks? In an instant, the 3,000 tiger tribe warriors behind him roared together. Yes. Since you are confident, go out and kill for this king. Annihilate all of those strange races freaks. Earthcracker's eyes glowed with extreme bloodlust. Let the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer troops witness the power of our tiger tribe. Come on, tiger tribe. Ho! Witness the might of our tiger tribe. 3,000 tigers roared at the same time. This was 3,000 tigers descended from the mountains together. This roar was magnificent to the extreme. With the powerful entrance of the tiger tribe, the battlefield instantly turned much more intense. The Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer army, and the tiger tribe, although far fewer in numbers than the opponent, had a battle strength tens of times stronger. With the addition of the weapons that Jun Moxie had created for them, and the battle formations he designed, their strengths were shocking. The instant that the two sides clashed, the joint army of evil Monarch Manor and Tian Fa occupied the absolute advantageous position. They were like tigers rampaging among a flock of sheep, chopping through their enemy like choppers cleaving through cabbages. At this time, a strange laughter rang out, and an eerie voice sounded. Gu Han. I've said before that I want to break past the defensive line of your allied army in a proper and fair manner. And I, Chuangshang Beidao, will also defeat you in battle personally. Now, it's time for me to realize my promise. Gu Han, if you have the guts, come out and fight me. The person who spoke was obviously Chuangshang Beidao. This was the #1 expert of the strange races, and the instant that the battle started, he instantly issued a challenge towards Gu Han. It was obvious that he'd already discovered the unfavorable situation for their side the moment the battle started. Against Tian Fa and the evil Monarch Manor's joint forces, although the strange races occupied the absolute advantage in numbers, they were still weaker overall. It was necessary to boost the morale of the main army in order to have a chance at victory. And the best way to do that was to defeat the strongest expert on the opponent's side as soon as the war began. After Chuangshang Beidao finished issuing his challenge, he shouted, "The subjugation of Xian is at hand. The bright world of flowers and sun is right before our eyes. All the brave warriors of my godly Sun tribe, 1,000 years of hegemony, an eternity of rule, shall all be founded today. Is everybody willing to follow me, Chuangshang Beidao, to reign for 1,000 ages?" Oh you. A tsunami of voices rang out, the culmination of the passionate roars of hundreds of thousands. Clearly, Chuangshang Beidao's words successfully brought up the battle will of the strange races army. The influence that Chuangshang Beidao had with the strange races was apparent. If Gu Han chose to accept the battle now and was defeated by Chuangshang Beidao, it would be a huge blow to the allied army. At this moment, Jun Moxie, Gu Han, and 9 Nether 14th young master had only just stepped into the camp. Within the main base, Mei Shuayan was still busily allocating the troops. Numerous TNFA experts could be seen leaving hurriedly after receiving their orders. In just a short moment, 24 100-men troops had already been sent out. As expected of the venerable Mei, who held up TNFA with her own strength after their decline. The quick and calm ability to command under pressure is truly something that's enough to cause people to gasp with amazement. Gu Han sighed. His eyes filled with admiration. It was still deep in the night right now, and it could be said to be an unfavorable condition for the Allied troops to fight. On the other hand, for the strange races, the conditions were exceedingly favorable and perfect. Their experts were adept with stealth techniques, and in the darkness, these techniques were even more terrifying. If they engaged the enemy in battle at this time, it would be giving the enemy countless free targets. So when Mei Shuayan was distributing the forces, she dissolved the army first, before arranging the experts into small groups of 100. Then, she directly inserted the groups of experts directly into the strange race's army, providing more assistance to the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer army, as well as the Tiger Tribe warriors. A small task force of 100 was akin to small waves on the ocean in a large-scale battle like this. Even if one wanted to look for them, it would be hard to find them. However, the battle strength of each individual was much higher than the normal enemy soldiers, with one person able to match up to 100 enemies. In such conditions, they could unleash their strongest fighting power without having to care about their surroundings, killing the crowded enemy forces around them in large swathes, indiscriminately. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1218. How did he humiliate you? A total of 24 100-person squads were divided into East, South, West, North, Northeast, Southeast, Northwest, and Southwest by Mei Shuayan. In each direction, there were 3 squadrons that divided further, splitting up and charging in 3 different directions. Every squadron would advance in a conical formation. If 3 squadrons met together, they would form into a larger cone. Mei Shuayan's orders were to advance all the way. No one was to retreat or sidetrack. They only needed to slaughter a path through until the comrades that were directly opposite them meet in the center and join forces. Then, they would charge back out from the bloody path that their comrades had smashed through, returning immediately after completion. Every squadron's mission was the same. At the same time, they would inform Solitary Eagle, Feng Wan Yun, and Tiger King. After the 24 squadrons completed their mission, they would retreat together. Although the forces allocated to this mission was not high, and there were only 2,400 people in total, each of those 2,400 were elites. With this kind of penetration tactic, it would deal devastating damages to the strange race's army. It would even have a high probability of disrupting their formations, scattering them and confusing their attack and defensive directions. The most important part of this battle strategy laid with the 3,000 Tiger Tribe warriors, as well as Feng Wan Yun and Solitary Eagle's army that was situated at the very core of the battlefield. The penetration of this 24 squadrons, together with the army at the core of the battlefield, would certainly be able to deal horrifying damage to the strange races. At the same time, it would be able to greatly reduce the pressure on them. As for the remaining main army, they had advanced 300 li, entrenching themselves behind huge metallic fortifications. If any enemy tried to force their way through the Allied army's defensive line, they would immediately counterattack with lethal force. The Leopard and Lion tribe warriors was also poised and watching the situation closely. If any squadron was entangled by the enemy and unable to come out, the military strength of these two forces would instantly pour in. With the speed of these two troops, they were the best candidates for this mission. Even peak experts like Jun Moxie, Gu Han, and the 9 Nether 14th young master was unable to find any problems with this kind of strategy. In such a dark and dreary environment, faced with the strange race's army who were able to utilize stealth techniques, only a strategy like this would count as an effective countermeasure. It was a near-perfect battle strategy. At this time, Chuangshang Beidao's challenge rang out from the distance. Gu Han's face changed and was just about to reply when he saw young Master Jun looking at him with a look filled with shock, as if he'd discovered a new continent. The impulsive rage that had just surged up in Gu Han's heart instantly dissolved into nothingness under such a gaze, and he even felt the hairs on the back of his neck standing on their ends. Hurriedly looking down to examine his clothing, he raised his head and asked, after ascertaining that there was nothing wrong with how he looked, "Why is Manor Lord Jun looking at me like that?" I say, old Gu, that fellow shouting out there wouldn't happen to be an old lover of yours, would it?" Jun Moxie asked with an incredulous expression. Gu Han's face instantly reddened, and a sense of inexplicable exasperation rose in his heart. No matter what, he hadn't expected young Master Jun to ask such a question. What kind of question was that? There are so many people here. And even Xiao Ying is looking over from the side. What the hell kind of weird question is that? Besides, the other party was someone of the strange races. A perverted race of conjoined bodies. How disgusting was that kind of question? What nonsense are you spouting? Gu Han roared with a greenish expression. This is such a disgrace to the refined class. Ah, it's not. A tinge of disappointment could be heard in Jun Moxie's words. What a pity, why not though? Gu Han's forehead was completely filled with black lines. He'd even forgotten completely about the rage with Chuangshang Beidao, completely transferring all his anger onto Jun Moxie. Gritting his teeth, he growled. "You, bastard! What the hell are you thinking? Could I have guessed wrongly?" Jun Moxie shrugged innocently. "Look at how the other party is shouting. That guy is lying on the bed, waiting to get pounded. He even swore that he would personally break through your defensive lines. Kakik. This is true love. Ah. Old Gu. As expected, you are the model pervert of our world. To even expand your reach all the way to the strange race's side. Look at how frustrated you've made the other party become. Old Gu. You're amazing. True love knows no bounds. Ah. This junior would like to ask, back then, did you pound the female side or the male side? It should be the female side, right? You brat. You're speaking nonsense. You. Gu Han was on the verge of collapsing on the spot. Just what kind of a being was this Jun Moxie? Ah. He dares to speak about anything. I nearly suffered a stroke. I'm speaking nonsense. Then, could I have guessed wrongly? So it was actually the male side? Oh my, I completely misjudged you. Why is your expression so ugly? Could I have guessed wrongly again? Maybe you don't restrict yourself. Content to enter anything. You. I. Nonsense. You. You bastard. You're speaking nonsense. Gu Han suddenly found it extremely difficult to breathe as he stammered and cursed. Everyone was completely floored by this exchange, and Mei Shuayan and Xiao Ying were both covering their mouths, while Mo Wu Dao and the rest suddenly began to cough heavily, as if they had all caught an extremely serious case of lung infection. The 14th young master directly roared aloud with laughter. Gu Han was so angry that steam rose from his head. He completely disregarded Chuangshan Beidao and was prepared to first fight to the death with young Master Jun. Far away, Chuangshan Beidao was still shouting arrogantly. Gu Han! Come out here! Go around with me! Gu Han! You coward! Gu Han! Come out! Battle with me, Chuangshan Beidao! We will determine who is stronger right here. Previously, Chuangshan Beidao's challenge caused the allied army to seethe with anger. But now, every word he said, instead resulted in waves of crazed laughter. Everyone treated him as though he was an enjoyable joke. Aya, old Gu, look, that fellow already cannot wait to go another round with you. Jun Moxie sniggered. And he wants to determine who is stronger? Could it be, when you said that I was speaking nonsense, you meant that you weren't the one doing the pounding, and that he was? Otherwise, why would there be a need to determine who is stronger? I hadn't expected that, old Guyu, no wonder. It was fine when he didn't speak, but the moment he said that, everyone's laughter grew more pronounced. Gu Han's face alternated between green and white, and he suddenly roared with rage. What the feck are you shouting about out there? Listen to that ridiculous duck-like voice of yours. What the feck are you shouting about? You Yin-yang confused, perverted old bastard. Chuangshan Beidao's voice instantly choked and stopped. Truthfully, this Chuangshan Beidao was an old opponent that had fought against Gu Han countless times. He always thought that he was extremely familiar with Gu Han's character and he had great confidence in this battle. He was sure that Gu Han would definitely not shirk from a fight, and as long as he won, everything would become set in stone. But at this moment, the normally gentlemanly Gu Han had actually cursed aloud in this manner. This was truly far outside of his expectations. In that moment, he didn't know how to continue. A roar of laughter rang out through the battlefield, and Solitary Eagle, who was soaked in blood and rampaging through the enemy ranks, howled with laughter. What the feck are you duck-voiced Yin-yang confused perverted old bastard shouting about? The other soldiers also laughed aloud, chorusing. What the feck are you duck-voiced Yin-yang confused perverted old bastard shouting about? Ahahaha. Even Gu Han, who started the whole slogan, had not expected those words that he'd shouted in rage, had actually greatly increased the morale of his own troops. This was truly an unexpected surprise. Half a moment later, an enraged roar rang out. Gu Han! You old cowardly turtle! Refined people may fight, but they do not sling insults. It's fine if you do not dare to fight with me. But you actually went as far as to humiliate me? What qualifications do you have to humiliate me? What kind of number one expert of the Xian continent are you? As those words rang out, a disdainful snort suddenly resounded in the air. I say, what's your name again? Oh, Chuangshan Beidao, right? I'm truly curious. What has Gu Han done to you? Is there a need for such a deep hatred? Who are you? Chuangshan Beidao grew alert. Although this speaker's voice sounded young, it was able to travel the distance of several hundred li, and yet sound as if it was a normal conversational voice. It didn't sound at all strained as if exerted by shouting. This person was definitely an expert. An expert that might be even more difficult to handle than Gu Han. The other voice did not answer Chuangshan Beidao's question, and instead asked with great interest. This whatever Chuangshan Beidao fellow, how did old Gu humiliate you? Did he PEU? Or, has he burst your chrysanthemum before? You should tell it to everyone. And let us all enjoy the story together. Her. I love listening to this kind of stories the most. I meant to say, justice is in the hearts of people. You should recount the entire incident properly. And if it was really old Gu who did something to you and refused to take responsibility, I could help you get justice. Chuangshan Beidao was so angry when he heard those words that he nearly fainted. With his entire face red with anger, he roared. Just who are you? Report your name. To be able to speak such insulting and shameless words, you can also be considered as a top character. A chuckle rang out in the air. Why are you so shameless? I had kind intentions in wanting to seek justice for you. Why are you scolding me as well? Forget it. A freak like you wouldn't be able to understand concepts like honor and justice anyway. This young master will not stoop to the same level as you. As for this young master's identity, this daddy refuses to let you know. If you have the guts, come over here. This daddy will definitely take the chance to humiliate you properly. Despicable. Despicable. The two voices that belonged to Chuangshan Beidao both roared with rage. Their eerie voices rang out in the night sky, sounding extremely disgusting. He hadn't expected that such a shameless person actually existed in the world of peak experts. Despicable? Just who is the despicable one? The disdainful voice rang out coldly. You chose to issue a challenge in a dark night like this. Did you think that all of us are idiots and cannot see what you're planning? By issuing a challenge on a dark night like this? If you really have the guts, come over here and fight properly with us. Sneaking around. And still shouting wildly about others being a coward. What kind of bullshit is that? We are all refined people here. And there's no need to spell things out so clearly. It's fine as long as everyone understands in their hearts. The moment those words came out, everyone gasped with realization. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1219. Soldier against soldier. General against general. The main reason why Chuangshan Beidao decided to begin the attack in the middle of the night was because of Gu Han. He calculated that Gu Han would definitely have to come out to him if he challenged him in front of everyone. If he did not come because of any kind of reason, the blow to the army would be too great. With Gu Han's personality, he would not be able to accept this kind of result. And so, he would definitely accept the challenge. But the sky was already dark. And with heaven-defying stealth techniques, if Gu Han really came out, the possibility of him falling into an ambush would be at least over 80%. With such chances, it would be no different from committing suicide. If Gu Han was defeated, or even killed here, the impact it would deal to the Allied army would undoubtedly be extremely huge. However, Chuangshan Beidao's carefully thought-out plan had been thoroughly destroyed by Jun Moxie. Gu Han had already cultivated for over 5,000 years, so he was naturally not an idiot. How would he not understand what Chuangshan Beidao was planning? He also knew that if he went out to meet the challenge, he would most likely meet some great dangers, having very low chances of escaping. But if it was still up to him now, he would still have no choice but to go and fight. Because he represented the 10,000 years old honor and glory of the three holy lands. Gu Han could be defeated, and he could even be killed. However, the 10,000 years old honor and pride of the three holy lands could not be tarnished. Now that Chuangshan Beidao's scheme had been exposed, instead of being angry, he actually laughed. Indeed, this seat had indeed laid a trap, calculating that Gu Han would come out and fight. even if he wasn't willing to. But I hadn't expected that this scheme would actually be spoilt with just a few words from you. From the looks of it, you are the person who truly deserves this seat's future considerations. For an expert like this, are you truly going to be so stingy with your name? Jun Moxie chuckled. For you to be able to acknowledge your foe like this is indeed rather magnanimous. But I'm sorry. Although my name is not really any great secret, I cannot tell it to you. Why is that? Chuangshang Beidao furrowed his brows. He couldn't understand this at all. The other person's name was not a secret, yet he refused to tell him it. Does he plan to frustrate me to death? The reason is simple. It's because you disgust me too much. That is all. Jun Moxie said in a casual manner. If my name was found out by you, it would be an unbearable shame for me. So, 1 second delayed of you knowing it is 1 second gained. As soon as those words rang out, the entire battlefield was filled with laughter. This bunch of warriors who had already started to grow frenzied from killing, instantly felt a great relaxing feeling in their hearts as they roared with joy. Bastard! Chuangshang Beidao cursed with rage. Come out here. If you have the guts, come and have a fight with me. Jun Moxie snorted, rolling his eyes with disdain. Feck your granny. This curse was so crisp and relentless, resonating loud and clear through the battlefield. Everyone. It wasn't clear what kind of expression Chuangshang Beidao had on his face right now, but the allied side was a sea of joy. Even the solemn and cold-faced experts of the three holy lands could not help but to reveal wide smiles on their faces. Inside the planning tent, Jun Moxie looked at everyone and said with a serious expression, "The strange races are cruel and cunning. And they have an absolute advantage in terms of numbers. This war is one that is fraught with dangers. We must always have a well-thought-out strategy to deal with them." What kind of strategy does Manor Lord Jun mean? Guhan asked with a heavy expression. Right now, we have 4 peak experts. You, me, Shui Yan, and the 9 Nether 14th Young Master. The 9 Nether 14th Young Master interrupted with a cold snort. Not 4. 3. I'm not with you guys. This is a war between the Xian continent and the strange races. It has nothing to do with this young master. Whatever you say, then. Do whatever you like. In any case, we weren't pinning any hopes on you. 3 then. The 3 of us must tend strictly to our stations, never leaving it no matter what. This is an extremely important point. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes at the 9 Nether 14th Young Master and continued. Shui Yan will be stationed at the base of the army, taking charge of moving and arranging the troops. This is an extremely important position, and you will be an anchor for the main army, holding the line and receiving reinforcements arriving from the continent. At the same time, you will be responsible for the arrangement of the troops based on the changes of the battlefield. Do not let down your guard for even a moment. Mei Shui Yan nodded, her eyes growing extremely determined. Although the position that Jun Moxie had arranged for her was at the backlands was the safest, her responsibilities were also the heaviest. The victory and defeat of this entire war rested very heavily in her hands. In that moment, Mei Shui Yan only felt an extremely heavy responsibility on her shoulders. As for old Gu, you are responsible for the side of the Holy Lands. Jun Moxie looked deeply at Guhan and said, Tomorrow, or perhaps the day after, the battle will erupt in full force. At the most appropriate time, the people of the 3 Holy Lands may very possibly be arranged to be the first wave of soldiers, pushing forward all the way. Old Gu, Don't forget the things I've said to you. Gu Han's expression was grave as he nodded. That is only natural. As for myself, I will be in charge of the troop movements at the front lines. Jun Moxie chose the most dangerous location for himself. Looking sternly at everyone, he emphasized word by word. Everyone, no matter which side you belong to, you must remember one thing. This is a war right now, not an exchange of skills of the pugilistic world. It also isn't a competition of skills between two people. Every action you make involves the safety of billions of people. Soldier against soldier, general against general. This is the most common knowledge of the battlefield. Jun Moxie said slowly. You must remember, Saint Venerables have Saint Venerable opponents, and Saint Emperors have Saint Emperor opponents. You must not act with emotion, showing yourselves to slaughter the weak soldiers. Every bit of energy you use unnecessarily will give the opponent's same-level experts a higher chance of victory. Our numbers are already smaller compared to the enemy, so we cannot afford to waste any experts. Saint Venerables, even if you don't kill a single enemy and die in the hands of an enemy's enduring heaven's expert, it is still not a loss. Because you died at the place it is most appropriate for you to die. The damage the enemy sustains, and the energy they expend will naturally result in an opportunity for them to be killed by others. Your mission is finished, and there will be no regrets in this war even if you die. In contrast, even if you killed more soldiers, if you hadn't managed to weaken the enemy's experts, you will still have let down the billions of lives on the Xian continent. Everyone fell into deep thought as they nodded dully. You must remember, even if you kill 10,000 strange races soldiers, it won't match up to a single Saint Venerable on our side. Everyone, the battlefield is a vicious place. If you die, I won't say anything about it. I only wish to say one thing. Even if you die, you need to die with the greatest value. Jun Moxie finished with a heavy voice. His eyes shone brightly as he swept his gaze across the crowd. Does anyone have anything to add? Jun Moxie knew very deeply that these people were all non-military fighters, and they could not be looked at as an ordinary army. Those words that he just said may not be needed to be emphasized so many times to a regular army, but to these people, he needed to remind them again and again. All of them were proud experts, and things like discipline and regimentation had never meant anything to them at all. At any time, some of these experts would end up charging into the front lines because of their emotions, slaughtering large swathes of enemy soldiers. But such actions would end with energy exhausted which the Allied army could not bear. The other party could still bear to expend themselves like that, because their foundations were solid. But their side could definitely not endure that. In fact, every tiny bit of energy that a Saint Venerable spent could very possibly end up as the deciding factor of this world. Even if their side Saint Venerable each killed 20,000 enemy soldiers before they were killed, it would still be a huge loss. Because the opponent's Saint Venerable expert that was freed up could cause thousands of lives of the soldiers on their side. Not to mention thousands, even several hundred, or 100 deaths were not something they could handle. But on the side of the strange races, the deaths of tens of thousands of soldiers were completely insignificant. And so, they had to treat it seriously. Such a choice was undoubtedly an extremely cruel decision. Because if they proceeded this way, there would undoubtedly be countless brothers with lower cultivation strength being killed by the enemy. They would have many powerful experts capable of saving these brothers, but because of this rule, they would have to watch by the side while their brothers were killed. However, this cruel command was the only right decision. The evil monarch manner Tianfa. Holy Lands. These forces were facing the grand army of the strange races which outnumbered them by several thousand times. If they only concentrated on reducing the enemy numbers, the only result would be a complete loss. The correct method was to concentrate all their strength to destroy their high-level experts, regardless of the price, even if it meant dying together with the experts of the enemy side. That was the only way, and the key to destroy the strange races' army. As for the ordinary strange races soldiers, even if they entered the main continent, they could be easily rounded up and killed later on. And so, this seemingly cruel decision was in fact the most basic condition. This kind of situation was actually very common in secular wars. When two armies were fighting, the generals of both sides would be watching each other. And before the war was over, even if one side was all killed, no one would make a move. Because once one side moved, the other side could take the opportunity to charge the main army, resulting in the collapse of the whole line. Although this was also a battlefield, most of the participants of this war were made up of experts of the pugilistic world. The golden laws and precious rules that applied to normal battlefields likely meant less than a fart to these people of the pugilistic world. It was this unique quality of the experts of the pugilistic world that created the greatest unique point, and also the greatest weakness of their army. Hot-bloodedness. They were exceedingly rash and emotional. In the pugilistic world, passion, hot blood, and rashness could be advantageous traits. But on the battlefield, they were things that could lead to execution by martial law. In that moment, the atmosphere in the tent turned somewhat strange. The remnant experts of the three holy lands, the people from the Heaven Saint Palace, the people from the evil Monarch Manor, the beast kings of Tianfa Forest, and the 9 Nether 14th young master whose participation was not clear, all these people were gathered together, and the enmity they still held for each other remained difficult to resolve. There were still deep hatred instilled within the hearts of all the different factions. But right now, all of them were sitting peacefully beside each other, for the same purpose, prepared to fight alongside each other at any moment. Such a situation left a complicated and inexplicable taste in everyone's hearts. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 1220. Die with no regrets. The air in here is not nice. It's too stuffy. The 9 Nether 14th young master snorted and said. This young master is going out for a walk. Without waiting for the others to reply, he disappeared with a so sound. What the hell was that? He didn't even apply for leave before going. How unruly. If the general was my third uncle instead, he would behead that fool on the spot. Jun Moxie furrowed his brows and complained. Everyone rolled their eyes, pretending that they hadn't heard him. Feck. You were actually hoping for the 9 Nether 14th young master to have regimental discipline. Why don't you go and ask a cock to lay eggs? That would be much simpler. The fact that this fellow could come here without creating trouble for the allied army is already an extremely fortunate thing. Even if Jun Xie was the commander, would he be able to behead that fellow? Don't kid around. What kind of knife will even be capable of beheading that fellow? All right, everyone, go back and prepare first. Jun Moxie waved his hand irritably. I only have one request. The 3 holy lands must only attack at the appropriate time. This is a joint agreement. The signal will be easy to send out. You just need to send a long shout. Gu Han nodded, not saying anything more. He stood up and led the experts of the 3 holy lands out. Mo Wudao walked right at the back, and when he was about to reach the door, He suddenly turned around and stared fixedly at Jun Moxie. Manor Lord Jun. This Mo has something to say. Manor Lord Jun said heavily. Speak. Jun Moxie looked back at him. Mo Wudao was not Guhan, and with Jun Moxie's current strength, he no longer put the former in his eyes anymore. As for Mo Wudao's schemes and plots, which he was good at, they did not mean anything here. Young Master Jun truly did not have the energy or the time to bother himself with him. But since they were now in an alliance, no matter how much he wanted to ignore him, he still had to entertain him with a few words. Back then, because of you, I lost my only younger brother. The two of us are already fated to not be able to share the sky since then. Mo Wudao's eyes trembled as he stared at Jun Moxie. A sorrowful look came over his face as he continued. However, I will no longer have any opportunities for revenge in this lifetime anymore. Not just you. I also will not have the chance to take revenge against Zhang Kuang who destroyed the 3 holy lands. Not only do I not have the chance, this Mo even has to beg the heavens. Mo Wudao's facial muscles twitched with agony. That the heavens would bless and protect you, to live on. Because if you die, this continent will truly be completely lost. It is an extreme contradiction. However, the world is just like this, utterly helpless. Praying desperately to the heavens, that an enemy, your mortal enemy, would live on safely. What kind of feeling was that? Perhaps Jun Moxie would never need to place Mo Wudao in his sights. But in this moment, Jun Moxie could clearly see Mo Wudao's torment. I will live. And live for a long time. Jun Moxie, indifferent eyes that seemed to look disdainfully at everything, suddenly softened a little. No matter what, for his enemy to think like this was something that was worthy of respect. Saying these words right now are already too late, and it won't help with anything, but this old man still wants to say this. With regards to the things that this old man had done before, to Venerable Mei, and to Tian Fa Forest, this old man expresses deep apology. Mo Wudao laughed bitterly and raised his head as he said in a loud voice. Today, this old man will admit that I had done wrongly. However, I do not regret my actions. If time can be reversed, and I can choose again, then provided that this old man wouldn't know that the pillar of heaven's mountains would collapse, and things would come this far, then, I would still choose to do the same thing. I have no regrets. Mo Wudao said heavily. At this time, there is no longer any need for you to apologize to me. Because I will not forgive you. Just as you do not regret. Mei Shuayan said blandly. As old enemies and as allies now, the only thing I can do now is to wish you a good journey ahead. A good journey ahead naturally referred to the Yellow Springs. Although Mei Shuayan didn't say it clearly, Mo Wudao naturally understood what she meant. One more thing. Mo Wudao straightened his back and looked again into Jun Moxie's eyes as he said in a loud voice. I know you have many things that you are unhappy about with the methods of the 3 holy lands. And you don't have any good opinions of us. You think that we are arrogant and only chase only after honor and recognition. But this old man wishes to tell you that although we've done many things wrongly, although we've harmed many people, we've only had one intention. And that is to protect this continent. To protect the people of this world. Even if we die, even if we were wrong, no one can take away this honor that our holy lands had built. Mo Wudao finished, his eyes blazing brightly. With a swift turn, he left the tent. As he walked out, the eyes of every one of the 3 holy lands were also trembling lightly, shining brightly. Even if we die, even if we were wrong, no one can take the honor away from us. All of a sudden, everyone felt the belief that had died in their hearts return like a roaring tide. Only until the people of the three holy lands had walked a long distance away did Jun Moxie's voice, which sounded as if he was pondering something, ring out. Although I still have many opinions about your holy lands until now. Although I have killed many of you, having deep enmity with most of you, although you have done many wrong things that I will never forgive you for. But in this moment, I offer you my apologies for having suspected your intentions before. Jun Moxie added heavily. I apologize. This simple apology from Jun Moxie was exceedingly impactful. Upon hearing those words, everyone from the three holy lands stopped, and they shook visibly. They could not believe that the lofty evil monarch would actually apologize to them. And it was such a serious apology. And because of those words, hot tears suddenly welled up in the eyes of many. There were even some who began to sob heavily, their sights becoming blurry with tears. This was a formal apology from the evil monarch. Although this evil monarch had said more than once before that he didn't care about the people of the continent, and that the fate of the world had never been his responsibility. But in this moment, the one who represented the continent to say those words was still Jun Moxie. Only Jun Moxie. In this moment, those words from Jun Moxie's mouth was no different from having obtained the acknowledgement of the continent. It was the same meaning as every word being worth its weight in gold. Mo Wu Dao turned around and everyone followed him, clasping their fists in the direction of the tent. We die with no regrets. This was a joint voice that belonged to everyone. Although only those few short words had come out of Mo Wu Dao's mouth, it encompassed all his complicated feelings. It was something that an ordinary person would not necessarily be able to understand even if he lived 100 lives. And it was even more impossible to experience. Following that, the group turned and left with large steps, no longer looking back. The wind blew shrilly in the air. An hour later, Jun Moxie sent people to deliver several thousand simple paper bags. There was only one request. Place your personal items into this. It didn't need to be anything valuable. It could be a piece of clothing, or even a clump of hair. Then, write down your names on the paper bags, as well as some words that you wish to say. Jun Moxie did not specify what he was going to do with those paper bags, but everyone from the three holy lands clearly knew what the paper bags were used for, and it meant everyone was given one paper bag. These extremely simple paper bags could be bought at 10 for a single coin, normally. But right now, in the hands of these several thousand experts of the Holy Land, these were undoubtedly the most precious items. It was going to be evidence that they had once existed and participated in this grand battle. Even their most precious belongings were not as valuable as these paper bags. In that moment, everyone hugged the paper bag close to their chests, or clenched in their fists. The entire Holy Land's camp was in a state of complete silence. At this time, the battle situation at the front lines had already reached an exceedingly heated level. The black robes that Solitary Eagle was always dressed in had already been soaked completely with blood. There was a long bloody scar on the right side of his face, and fresh blood flowed continuously from his head. His body was also lined with countless wounds. However, his body still remained as straight and proud as an eagle's. At this point, the custom saber in his hands had already disappeared, changing into the unique hooked blade of the strange races. After countless, repeated hacking, even the exceedingly sturdy weapon, which had been at the level of a divine weapon, had already been reduced to powder. The weapon in his hand right now was already the sixth weapon he'd snatched. Even this blade he was using was already terribly chipped and could not last much longer. Solitary Eagle cried out, and his body shot out. His left hand was bent like an eagle's claw, sweeping out. Numerous soft pu sounds rang out, and 10 heads were smashed apart. His right hand swept across the throats of 13 strange races warriors, and their bright red blood painted an arc across the sky, bringing on a dazzling display, as if it was the final release of their lives. A ripple suddenly appeared behind him, and a black shadow appeared beside Solitary Eagle. Before the figure of the shadow appeared, a sharp blade was already stabbing towards his back. Solitary Eagle seemed to have a pair of eyes behind his head. Without even turning, he moved his arms, jamming the blade between his armpit. Then, he stepped backwards rapidly, swinging the blade on his right hand, accurately slicing across the throat of the male and female conjoined body. At the same time, he smashed his elbow roughly against the throat of this frenzy blade enduring earth. Then, with a twist of his hand, the head of this frenzy blade enduring earth was thrown into the sky with pu sound. Killed with a single blow. This was already the 13th frenzy blade enduring earth that Solitary Eagle had killed. This story will be continued to chapter 1221. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.